The night my mother chose crystal glasses over my daughter's heartbeat, I understood something terrifying. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who refuses to watch you bleed alone. I didn't knock. I slammed through the iron-framed doors of my mother's estate like a storm she couldn't ignore. Rainwater streaked down my face, mixing with tears I didn't remember giving permission to fall. Inside, violins sang softly. Laughter floated. Money breathed comfortably in every corner. And somewhere between the silk gowns and imported marble, my daughter was dying. My name is Rhea Collins. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed emergency room nurse. And that night, in Greenwich, Connecticut, I realized being trained to save strangers meant nothing when your own family refuses to save your child. The chandelier above me exploded into light as I stepped inside. Conversation stalled. Eyes turned. A few guests whispered my name like it was a stain. My mother, Margaret Collins, philanthropist, society darling, froze mid-laugh. Her champagne flute hovered in the air. Then her smile collapsed. She moved fast, faster than I remembered. Her hand clamped around my arm, nails pressing through wet fabric. "Rhea, you're soaked," she whispered sharply. "This is not the moment. Not the moment." My brother's pre-wedding celebration was in full swing. A $300,000 event. Imported orchids. A string quartet flown in from Vienna. Every detail perfect. Paid in full. No expense spared. Except one. My father appeared beside her, already annoyed. Not worried. Not curious. Annoyed. "People are staring," he said. "Go clean yourself up." I didn't move. "Zoey collapsed at school," I said. My voice cracked like thin ice. "She's in critical condition. They think it's a congenital heart defect that suddenly worsened." Silence stretched. Then my mother exhaled. "Rhea," she said slowly, "we discussed this. You're always dramatic. Always dramatic. Zoey is 6 years old. She likes strawberry pancakes and insists on tying her shoes even when she's late. She calls me her hero because I wear scrubs. And she needed surgery. Immediate surgery. A procedure my hospital didn't cover. A procedure that cost $180,000 upfront. I had already emptied my savings. Maxed my cards. Sold my car. So I came to the only people who could help. My parents. "We'll talk later," my mother said. "Blake's big night cannot be overshadowed by this." This. I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly. Quietly. Dangerously. "Hold on, before we get into the real stuff, I want to know, what are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments." I followed them into the study anyway. The door shut. Thick. Final. "She needs surgery by morning," I said. "If we wait." My father interrupted. "We're not pulling funds. Everything is allocated. Allocated. For flowers that would wilt in days. For music that would fade in hours. But you paid $300,000 for a party," I said. "She's your granddaughter." My mother looked at me the way you look at a stranger asking for change. Cold. Calculating. "You made your choices," she said. "Don't punish us for them." That's when I understood. They weren't refusing because they couldn't help. They were refusing because they didn't want to. And as I stood there, soaked and shaking, something darker replaced my fear. Because if they thought this was the end of the story, they had no idea what I was about to become. The moment they said no, something inside me went silent. Not calm. Not acceptance. Something colder. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't collapse the way my mother expected. Instead, I nodded. Slowly. Like I was filing the moment away for later use. "All right," I said. That single word confused them more than any outburst ever could. My mother blinked. "All right." I turned toward the door. My wet shoes left dark footprints across her Persian rug. I didn't apologize. I didn't look back. But right before I stepped out, my father added, almost casually, "Rhea, don't make this into something it isn't." I paused. Oh, it was already something. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A hospital number. I answered before the second ring. "Miss Collins, The doctor said carefully. Your daughter's condition is unstable. We need confirmation within 12 hours, or we move to palliative support. 12 hours. I leaned against the cold stone wall of the estate and slid down until I was sitting on the ground. The laughter from inside drifted through the glass doors. Someone toasted. Someone clapped. My mother was probably smiling again. I stared at my hands. These hands had saved strangers. Cardiac arrests. Trauma cases. Kids hit by drunk drivers. I'd brought people back from the edge more times than I could count, but not my own child. I drove straight to the hospital. I didn't remember the roads. Muscle memory took over. When I walked into Zoey's room, machines beeped in soft, steady rhythms. Her chest rose shallowly. Her skin looked too pale against the white sheets. "Mama," she whispered when she saw me. I forced a smile, sat beside her, held her tiny hand. "Hey, Bug," I said. "How you feeling?" She shrugged. "Tired." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Listen, sweetheart, if Mommy has to step out for a bit, I need you to be brave, okay?" She nodded, too easily, like she was used to being strong. That broke me. I stepped into the hallway and leaned my head against the wall. Nurses passed. Doctors whispered. And then my phone vibrated again. A text. From my mother. "We've spoken to Blake. This is his moment. Please don't create drama. We'll discuss options after the wedding." After. My fingers trembled as I typed back. She doesn't have after. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then nothing. That was the second something broke inside me. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time. Just breathing. Thinking. Calculating. Revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with clarity. And suddenly, I had it. You see, my family didn't get rich by accident. My father wasn't just a retired executive. He was a silent partner in a private medical supply firm. A firm that supplied cardiac equipment to, guess where? My hospital. And guess who signed off on emergency contracts when machines failed or upgrades were needed? Me. I pulled out my laptop, logged into the hospital procurement system. Not to steal, not to hack, just to look. And what I saw made my blood run ice cold. Irregularities, delayed approvals, invoices routed through shell vendors. Nothing illegal on the surface, but messy, sloppy. The kind of mess that collapses under scrutiny. My father trusted that no one would ever look too closely, especially not his own daughter. That's when my phone rang again. This time it wasn't family. It was Dr. Henson, the hospital director. "Rhea," he said, tense. "I need to talk to you. Tonight." "About Zoey?" I asked. "No," he replied. "About your father." I closed my eyes. The universe had just handed me a loaded weapon. And suddenly, I wasn't asking my parents for help anymore. I was becoming the one thing they feared most. The person who could take everything from them. I didn't go home. I didn't sleep. I drove straight back to the hospital like a woman walking toward her own execution. Except this time, I was holding the blade. Dr. Henson was waiting in his office, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He looked like a man who had aged 5 years in one night. The blinds were shut. The lights dimmed. "Sit," he said. I stayed standing. "Just tell me why my father's name is suddenly circling my inbox at 2 a.m, I said. He rubbed his temples. An anonymous compliance report came in. Detailed. Surgical. It flagged procurement inconsistencies tied to your father's firm. Things I can't ignore. Anonymous. I almost laughed. "Do you know how dangerous this is?" he continued. "If regulators step in, contracts freeze. Equipment shipments stop. Surgeries get delayed." I met his eyes. Like my daughter's? That stopped him. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Uncomfortable. "You're asking me to choose," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I'm telling you that choice has already been made. You just haven't admitted it yet." I finally sat down. "I need a temporary authorization," I said. "Emergency funds. Off books if necessary. You know the policy loophole. I've used it for undocumented patients. Disaster cases." He leaned back. "And in return?" I took a breath. I'll cooperate fully with compliance. I'll testify if it comes to that. His jaw tightened. That would destroy your family. I thought of my mother's text. After the wedding. It already did, I said. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, thick, labeled, Collins Medical Supply, Internal Review. You were right, he said. They've been skimming. Not millions, but enough. I didn't feel victory. I felt nausea. Authorize the surgery, I said again. Tonight. He stood, walked to the window, then nodded once. I'll make the call. My legs nearly gave out. Zoey went into surgery at 4:17 a.m. I watched from behind the glass as they wheeled her away. Her little fingers waved weakly. I pressed my palm to the window, like it could reach her. And while surgeons worked to save my child, my parents toasted champagne under chandeliers. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of waiting. 6 hours of pacing. 6 hours of wondering if revenge was worth the cost if I lost her anyway. When the doctor finally came out, his mask was off. His eyes were tired. She's stable, he said. Critical, but stable. We fixed the defect. Now we wait. I collapsed into a chair and sobbed like I'd been holding my breath for 6 years. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother. What did you do? I stared at the message. Then another came through. From my mother. The bank froze 2 of our accounts. I smiled through tears. Funny timing, I typed back. Zoey just came out of surgery. No response. By morning, everything had changed. Regulators requested documents. Vendors paused shipments. Lawyers made quiet calls. The wedding planner called me, of all people, asking if I knew why the venue was concerned. Concerned. I sat by Zoe's bed as she slept, machines humming steadily. Her color was better, her breathing deeper. And for the first time since this started, I allowed myself to think ahead. Not just about survival, about consequence. Because my parents still thought this was a misunderstanding, a phase. Something they could smooth over with money and apologies once the wedding dust settled. They didn't realize I wasn't done. They also didn't realize the most dangerous part hadn't even begun. Because saving my daughter was only step 1. Making them feel what it's like to beg. That was step 2. The first apology came disguised as concern. My mother didn't call. She never called when she was losing control. She sent her assistant. Mrs. Collins would like to check on Zoey. The woman said softly when she appeared outside the ICU room, clutching a designer handbag like a shield. She's worried. Worried. I looked past her, straight down the hall. Zoey's resting. No visitors. The assistant hesitated. She also wanted me to mention that this situation has become complicated. I smiled. Not kindly. It's been complicated, I said. She just noticed. The assistant left. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Mother. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 5 times. When I finally answered, I didn't speak. Rhea, she said, her voice honeyed, strained. Why didn't you tell us it was this serious? I closed my eyes. I did, I said. You told me not to ruin the party. A pause. Then a sigh. The theatrical kind. Things escalated unexpectedly, she continued. Your father's under stress. The wedding sponsors are nervous. Sponsors. So am I said. My daughter almost died. Her voice hardened. Don't exaggerate. That was it. No, I said calmly. You don't get to minimize this anymore. You made a choice. I made one too. What choice? She snapped. I leaned closer to Zoey's bed, watching her chest rise and fall. I chose her, I said. You chose yourselves. She hung up. By noon, the wedding was postponed. By evening, the whispers had reached every corner of their social circle. People who used to kiss my mother's cheek suddenly had prior commitments. Donations were quietly paused. Invitations rescinded. My brother showed up unannounced. Blake looked nothing like the golden boy from the photos. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes bloodshot. What did you do to Dad? He demanded. standing in the hallway like he owned the place. I stood up slowly. Lower your voice. You threatened him, he said. You always hated him. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. I begged him. He flinched. They're scared, Blake continued. Lawyers say this could turn criminal. Mom hasn't slept.
Good.
She didn't sleep the night Zoey collapsed either, I said. She was dancing. He looked away. I need you to fix this, he said quietly. I stepped closer until we were inches apart. Fix what? I asked. The fraud? The neglect? Or the part where they let a child die to protect a wedding? His jaw clenched. You're being cruel.
Cruel.
That word used to hurt me. Cruel is telling a 6-year-old she has to wait. I said. Cruel is watching monitors flatline while your mother argues about seating charts. He left without another word. That night, I received an email. Settlement offer. My parents' lawyers proposed covering Zoey's medical costs. In full. Plus emotional damages. Plus a trust fund. All contingent on one thing. Silence. No testimony. No cooperation. No further interference. I stared at the screen. They thought money still worked on me. I forwarded the email to Dr. Henson, then to the compliance officer, then to the state regulator whose name now sat at the top of my contacts. And finally I replied, no. My mother showed up the next morning. No assistant. No pearls. Just sunglasses and trembling hands. She stood at the foot of Zoey's bed, staring at her sleeping granddaughter like she was seeing a ghost. She looks so small, she whispered. I didn't respond. We can fix this, she said. We'll do better. Just tell me what you want. I met her eyes. I wanted you to choose her, I said. You didn't. So now you don't get to choose the ending. Her lip quivered. You're destroying this family. I leaned in, voice low. No, I said. I'm just telling the truth about it. She sank into the chair, finally breaking. And for the first time, I saw fear, not for reputation, but for survival. Because the world she built on money and control was collapsing. And she knew whose hands were on the trigger. Fear changes people, especially when they've never felt it before. My mother started calling every morning at exactly 7 a.m. Like routine might restore control. Like consistency could erase what she'd done. I never answered. Instead, I focused on Zoey. She woke up 2 days after surgery, groggy and confused, but alive. When she smiled at me, weak but real, something inside my chest finally loosened. Did I scare you, Mama? She asked. I brushed her hair back gently. A little, I admitted. But you're the bravest person I know.
She grinned.
Then winced. Then slept again. Outside her room, the hospital buzzed with tension. Supply shipments were delayed. Executives whispered. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one said my family's name out loud. Until the investigators arrived. 2 state compliance officers. Neutral expressions.
Clipboards.
The kind of people who don't care how rich you are. They asked to speak with me. We sat in a quiet conference room. The door closed. The air shifted. You're aware your father may be facing charges, one of them said. Yes, I replied. You're also aware that your testimony could be decisive. Yes. They studied me. Not like predators. Like judges. Why are you doing this? The second one asked. Most people protect their family. I didn't hesitate. My daughter almost died, I said, because money mattered more than her life. They nodded. Once. As if that answered everything. That afternoon, my father was admitted to the same hospital. Chest pains. Stress-induced, they said. I watched from across the hallway as nurses rushed him into a room. The irony tasted bitter. He had access to the best care. Immediate attention. No delays. No cost concerns. My mother stood outside his door, shaking. She saw me. Her face hardened. Are you happy now? I walked past her. Ask him how Zoey felt waiting. She slapped me. Hard. The sound echoed. Every head turned. Security moved in instantly. Nurses froze. My mother stood there, hand raised, breath hitching like she'd shocked herself. "Get her out," I said calmly. They escorted her away as she screamed my name. That night, the charges became official.
Fraud.
Misrepresentation. Contract manipulation. My father's accounts were frozen entirely. The company distanced itself publicly. The board released a statement about ethical commitments. My brother called again. "They're offering to plead," he said. "Reduced charges. Dad's health." "No," I said. "You don't understand," he pleaded. "This could ruin him." I closed my eyes. "He ruined himself," I said. "I just stopped protecting him. The wedding was canceled. Not postponed. Canceled. Sponsors pulled out. The venue issued a public apology. Society blogs devoured the story. Elite philanthropists under investigation as grandchild battles health crisis. People began to ask questions my mother had spent decades avoiding. At Zoey's bedside, I read her stories, brought her crayons, let her color hearts and stars on my scrubs. And in those quiet moments, doubt crept in. Was I going too far? Then I remembered my mother's words. "Not now, we have guests." The trial date was set. That's when my mother made her final move. She offered herself instead. She came to me alone, no lawyers, no assistants. Sat across from me in the hospital cafeteria, hands wrapped around untouched coffee. "I'll testify against him," she said. "I'll give them everything. Just make it stop." I studied her face. Lines I'd never noticed. Fear etched deep. "And Zoey?" I asked. "She'll have everything," my mother said quickly. "Private schools. Trusts. Security." I leaned back. "You still don't get it," I said softly. This was never about money. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Then what do you want?" I stood. "I want you to live with it," I said. "All of it." I walked away before she could answer. Behind me, the empire finished collapsing. And ahead of me, something unexpected waited. Because the press had started calling me something new. Not a daughter. Not a whistleblower. A threat. Being labeled a threat changes the way people look at you. Hospital staff started whispering when I passed. Not out of fear, out of respect mixed with caution. Doctors who barely knew my name before suddenly nodded too quickly. Administrators avoided elevators with me. I wasn't just Rhea anymore. I was the woman who burned her own bloodline to save her child. And my parents felt that shift immediately. My father was released from the hospital under supervision. House arrest. Ankle monitor. The man who once owned rooms now needed permission to leave one. My mother vanished from public life entirely. No charity luncheons. No galas. No interviews. The silence around her was louder than applause ever was. Zoey, meanwhile, began to heal. She sat up on her own for the first time a week later. When she laughed, really laughed, the sound cracked something open inside me. "You promised you'd come back," she said. "I always will," I replied. I meant it more than she could understand. Then the pressure started. First, it was subtle. A senior administrator pulled me aside. "You understand this investigation affects hospital funding." A colleague whispered, "You've made enemies you don't see yet." Then came the letter. Notice of administrative review. They were reopening my past cases. My authorizations. My emergency overrides. Phishing. They wanted leverage. Dr. Henson called me into his office again. This time, the blinds were open. Daylight poured in. "They're pushing," he said. "Your family's lawyers are desperate. They're implying retaliation lawsuits. Wrongful termination. Emotional distress." I crossed my arms. "And you?" He looked at me for a long moment. "I'm choosing the side I can sleep with." That was the first kindness I'd felt from authority in weeks. But my parents weren't done. I found out through a reporter. Apparently, my mother had framed the story differently in private circles. I was unstable, emotionally compromised, a grieving single mother who overreacted. They were laying the groundwork. So when Child Protective Services showed up at my door, I wasn't surprised. They were polite, professional, smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Routine check," the woman said. Zoey sat on the couch beside me, coloring. Does your mommy ever get angry? The man asked her gently. Zoey looked up. Only when people are mean. That ended the visit quickly. But the message was clear. They would take everything if they could. That night, I sat alone in my apartment after Zoey fell asleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fridge, the distant traffic. Revenge had never been my goal. Protection was. But now I realized something terrifying. To protect her forever, I had to end them completely. Not physically, socially, legally, irreversibly. I made one final call. To the press. Not tabloids. Investigative journalists. I gave them everything. Documents, emails, timelines, texts, and one recorded voicemail. My mother's voice. Rhea, please.
Not now.
We have guests. When the story broke, it detonated. Not just fraud, neglect. A documented refusal to assist a dying child while hosting a luxury event. Public sympathy evaporated overnight. Sponsors disavowed. Boards resigned. Foundations dissolved. My parents became symbols of something ugly. And symbols don't recover. The night before the trial, my brother showed up again. He looked empty. They hate us, he said quietly. Everyone. I looked at him, really looked. I didn't do that, I said. The truth did. He nodded. Mom wants to see Zoey. I shook my head.
No.
She says she's changed. I stood, opening the door. Then she can live differently, I said. Away from us. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified calmly.
Clearly.
Without tears. Facts don't need emotion to be devastating. The verdict came back unanimous.
Guilty.
When the judge read the sentence, my father didn't look at me. My mother did. And in her eyes, I finally saw it. Not anger, not pride, regret. But regret is a luxury for people who still have time. That night, I tucked Zoey into bed. Mama, she said sleepily, are we safe now? I kissed her forehead. Yes, I said. And for the first time since that rain-soaked night, I believed it. But the world had one more surprise waiting. Because justice doesn't always end a story. Sometimes, it hands you a new beginning you never expected. Safety is a strange thing. You don't feel it all at once. It arrives in pieces. Quiet mornings, uninterrupted sleep, a laugh that isn't followed by fear. 3 months after the verdict, Zoey and I moved. Not far, just far enough. A smaller place. Sunlight through kitchen windows. No marble, no gates, no ghosts. I changed hospitals too. Some people thought I ran. I didn't. I chose peace. Zoey started school again. A different one. New backpack. New teachers who didn't know her story, only her smile. On her first day, she waved at me and ran inside without looking back. That was the moment I knew I'd done the right thing. Then the letters started arriving. Handwritten. From strangers. Parents. Nurses. Whistleblowers. People who had stayed silent for years, terrified of losing everything. You gave me courage. I finally reported my supervisor. My child got treatment because I spoke up. I read every single one. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like a survivor. I started feeling like something else. My mother tried once more. A single letter. No return address. I think about Zoey every day. I didn't respond. My father's sentence was reduced due to health. He would spend his time confined, stripped of titles, forgotten by the circles that once bowed to him. That punishment suited him more than prison ever could. One afternoon, Zoey asked a question I'd been dreading. Do I have a grandma? She asked, swinging her legs on the park bench. I paused. Yes, I said carefully. Where is she? I took a breath. She made choices that hurt people, so she can't be with us. Zoey nodded like that made sense, because to a child, it did. Okay, she said. Can we get ice cream? Life went on. But the story didn't end there. I was invited to speak at a medical ethics conference. Then another. Then a panel. They introduced me as a patient advocate. I corrected them. I'm a mother. I said. Everything else came after. The applause was uncomfortable, but necessary. A nonprofit reached out. They wanted me to help design a rapid response fund for children denied emergency care due to cost. I hesitated. Revenge had taken so much from me. Did I want to keep living in its shadow? Zoey answered that without knowing. She brought me a drawing one night. It showed two stick figures. One big, one small, holding hands, a heart over them. What's this? I asked. That's us, she said. You save me. I save you. I joined the nonprofit, not as a figurehead, as someone who knew the system's cracks intimately. We helped our first child within a month, then another, and another. I never spoke my parents' names publicly again. I didn't need to. Their legacy had already been rewritten. One evening, while tucking Zoey in, she asked, "Mama, are you a hero?" I shook my head. No, baby. What are you then? I smiled. I'm someone who didn't look away. She yawned. That's better. She fell asleep mid-sentence. I sat there for a long time, listening to her breathe. Revenge had started this journey, but love finished it. Still, there was one final truth I hadn't faced yet. Because revenge stories don't always end with victory. Sometimes, they end with forgiveness. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Forgiveness doesn't arrive with relief. It arrives with resistance. I didn't want it, didn't ask for it, didn't believe it belonged anywhere near what my parents had done. Yet it kept knocking. It started with dreams. Not nightmares, those had faded. These were quieter. I'd see my mother standing in a doorway, not speaking, just watching. Not demanding. Not manipulating. Simply small. I'd wake up angry at myself for even imagining her that way. Then the call came. My father had taken a turn for the worse. Advanced heart failure. Weeks, maybe months. The social worker asked gently, "Would you like to see him?" I said no without hesitation. After I hung up, Zoey walked into the room. "Why are you sad?" she asked. "I'm not," I said. She studied my face. "You are." Children always know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the nonprofit reports. The numbers of kids helped, lives redirected. Everything I'd built after the fire. And still, something tugged at me. Not obligation. Closure. I went alone. The hospital room was dim. Machines hummed. My father looked smaller than I remembered.
Frail.
A shell of the man who once commanded rooms. He opened his eyes when I entered. "Rhea," he whispered. I didn't sit. I didn't touch him. "You're not here to forgive me," he said, almost smiling. "You never were." I crossed my arms. "I'm here to say goodbye." He nodded slowly. "That's more than I deserve." Silence filled the space. "I didn't think you'd go this far," he said. "I thought you'd fold, like you always did." I met his gaze. "I stopped folding the night you chose flowers over my daughter." His eyes closed. "I was wrong," he said.
Not sorry. Wrong.
I left before he could say more. 2 weeks later, he died. The news barely made a ripple. A quiet service. No cameras. No speeches. My mother didn't attend. She called me instead. "I don't want money," she said immediately. "I don't want forgiveness." I waited. "I just want to see Zoey," she continued. "Once." I closed my eyes. Every instinct screamed no. But another voice, smaller, steadier, asked a harder question. "What does protecting your child look like now?" I set boundaries like stone. Public place. 30 minutes. No gifts. No promises. She agreed to all of it instantly. They met in a park. My mother cried the moment she saw Zoey. Zoey stared at her. Curious. "Hi," Zoey said politely. My mother knelt. "Hi, sweetheart." They talked about school. About favorite colors.
About dogs.
My mother didn't mention the past. Didn't ask for love. When time was up, she stood. "I won't ask again," she said quietly to me. "Thank you." She walked away alone. Zoey tugged my hand. She sad. Yes, I said. Did you make her sad? I knelt to Zoey's level.
No.
She made herself sad. Zoey nodded, accepting it. On the drive home, something lifted. Not forgiveness. Release. I hadn't absolved her, but I'd stopped carrying her weight. That night, I realized something important. Revenge had been justice with teeth. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, was justice with boundaries. And boundaries were the strongest thing I'd ever built. I tucked Zoey in. Are we still safe? She asked. Yes, I said. And we're free. She smiled. And for the first time, I felt like the story was truly nearing its end. But one final chapter remained. Because stories like this don't end quietly. They end with meaning. Meaning doesn't announce itself. It settles in slowly, like dust after a storm. Months passed, then a year. Zoey grew stronger.
Faster.
Louder. She joined a soccer team and insisted on wearing mismatched socks for luck. Her scar faded into a thin silver line. She called her superhero mark. I watched her run across fields, lungs full, heart steady. And every time, I remembered how close I'd come to losing that sight forever. The nonprofit grew faster than anyone expected. Hospitals partnered. Policies changed. Emergency funds became automatic in 3 states. No child would be denied life-saving care because a signature came too late. Reporters asked me to lead it permanently. I declined. Leadership changes you. It pulls you away from the reason you started. Instead, I trained others. Mothers, nurses, advocates. I became a quiet force. My mother never asked to see Zoey again. She sent one final letter. I understand now that love without action is cruelty. I'm sorry I learned too late. I read it once. Then I burned it. Not out of anger, out of closure. One afternoon, a young nurse stopped me in the hallway at work. I know who you are, she said nervously. I just wanted to say, I didn't think I was brave until I heard your story. I smiled. Bravery isn't loud, I said. It just shows up. That night, Zoey asked me to tell her story.
About when I was sick, she said.
I hesitated, then nodded. I told her the truth. Carefully,
Gently.
that people sometimes choose the wrong things. That love means choosing again when you fail.
And you chose me, she said.
Every time, I replied. She curled into my side. Safe. Later, alone, I thought about revenge. How it began as rage. How it transformed into justice. How it ended as something else entirely.
I didn't win.
I protected. And that mattered more. I checked my phone before bed. A message from an unknown number. This is Blake. I'm leaving the country. Starting over. I hope one day you understand why we were weak. I didn't respond. Understanding isn't required for accountability. The past no longer chased me. I'd outrun it. And tomorrow I'd wake up, pack lunches, complain about homework, laugh at silly jokes. An ordinary life. Hard one. Earned. Before turning off the light, I looked at Zoey sleeping. I whispered a promise into the dark. No one ever chooses over you again. That was my revenge. And my redemption. One last thing remained. Not for me. For anyone listening. Because if you've ever felt powerless, this story was for you. And the ending? It wasn't about my parents. It was about what happens when you stop asking for permission to protect what matters most. The final chapter was ready. If you're still here, listening to my voice, then you already understand something most people never will. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about refusal. Refusing to accept cruelty as normal. Refusing to stay quiet when silence costs lives. Refusing to beg people who already decided you don't matter. My story didn't end with handcuffs or headlines. It ended on a random Tuesday morning. Zoey was late for school. She spilled juice on her shirt, couldn't find her shoes, and blamed the cat for absolutely everything. I stood there, arms crossed, pretending to be stern while failing miserably. Mama, she said, suddenly serious. If I get sick again, will it happen like before? The question hit harder than any courtroom verdict. I knelt in front of her and held her shoulders. No, I said. Never again.
Why?
Because I changed the rules. Because I learned that love doesn't wait for approval. It acts. I walked her to school that day and watched her disappear through the doors, backpack bouncing, heart strong. Then I went to work. Just another nurse. Just another shift. Just another child who would be saved without their parent ever knowing how close they came to losing everything. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't my ending. It was my beginning. I stopped being the woman who begged at marble doors. I became the woman who builds exits for others. My parents' name still surfaces sometimes. In legal journals. In cautionary ethics lectures. Not as villains. As warnings. That feels right. Because the truth is, they didn't lose everything because of me. They lost everything because they believed money could replace morality. And money always loses that fight. 1 year after Zoey's surgery, we celebrated quietly. Pancakes. Candles. No speeches. She blew out her candle and whispered her wish. I asked her what it was. She smiled. That no kid has to be scared like I was. I hugged her so tight she laughed. That's the legacy. Not revenge. Impact. So, if you're listening to this and you're in that moment right now, standing in the rain, being told not now, watching someone you love suffer while others sip champagne, hear me, you are not weak for asking, but you are powerful the moment you stop waiting. Document everything. Tell the truth. Protect who matters. And if the world calls you difficult, dramatic, or dangerous for it, good. That means you're doing it right. Before I go, I want to say this directly to you. Yes, you watching right now. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of someone you're fighting for, if it lit a spark you didn't expect, please take 1 second to like this video, share it with someone who needs strength today, and subscribe to the channel Silent Revenge Lab. Stories like this don't survive without people who refuse to look away. And if you're still wondering whether I regret what I did, I don't. Because every night, I hear my daughter breathing peacefully in the next room. And that sound, that's the only verdict that ever mattered.